For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to StratNewsGlobal, and welcome to this special show on the legacy of General Rawat, the late Chief of Defence Staff. I'm Surya Gangadharan, and my guest for this evening is General D.S.Hooda, former Northern Army Commander. General, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you so much, Surya. Thank you.
So let's get straight to question number one. In the last 2 years, General Rawat's tenure, what were some of the original objectives, that he was targeted to achieve, and what has he achieved?
So, Surya, if you're talking about the legacy of General Rawat, I think his, singular contribution and most significant contribution has been as the Chief of Defence Staff. He was asked to undertake reforms in the military. Reforms aimed towards achieving jointness, achieving integration in the services, and also to oversee a comprehensive capability development plan, with priorities being given out, inter-service priorities being looked at. So I think these are the two areas in terms of integration, in terms of jointness, in terms of capability development that he has made. He has made a very, very significant contribution. And so, we must also remember that he was doing this at a time when, he was the first appointed CDS. So he also had to, at the same time, put processes of his own office in place. He also had to put processes and procedures for the Department of Military Affairs, which is, again, an absolutely new organization.
Yeah.
So I think tremendous amount of work that he had to do, and the pace at which he moved was very, very impressive.
Mm-hmm. So when you ticked off a number of points, where would you say he has reached, say, for integration? Are we close to achieving that kind of jointness, which was the target set by the government?
So Surya, I think it's still work in progress. But the thing is, he fleshed out the broad sort of contours of what this integration will look like. What jointness would look like. For example, he put in place, started this joint logistics notes that he has put in place at 3 places. He has fleshed out the outline of the integrated commands and what they will look like. Now, we could argue that, some of the structures could need refinement, and we know there are some reservations, particularly from the Indian Air Force. But he has put, the basic structure in place. And I think, the 3 services are agreed on one thing, that, greater jointness and integration is required. Now, what shape these structures actually take place when they are, when they come into place is something that we can see. But as I said, the broad contours are something that he's already put in place.
Mm-hmm. What about capability enhancements, sir?
So what happened, Surya, is what happened before the office of the CDS was established was that each service was planning its capability development. And because budgets are obviously limited, each service prioritizes its own requirements.
Yeah.
Now, while we had the office of, the integrated defense staff, but the fact is, it really didn't have enough teeth to be able to enforce inter-service prioritization. So with the office of the CDS, he brought these issues in. As I've written in my piece for the Indian Express also, Surya, what happens is with every service pushing its own sort of priorities, you could have 1 or 2 services being left behind in modernization. And we saw that particularly in the case of the Army, most of the equipment is of the vintage category.
Yeah.
With the CDS office coming in and, with General Rawat, who was there at the helm, you could prioritize that, okay, this is the limited budget, and in the inter-service priorities, this service will get so much money, so that capability development can be looked at in a more comprehensive manner rather than being in single service, stovepipes.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that is now happening, that there is a kind of a discussion? I mean, how does this happen, frankly? This whole business of prioritizing which service gets more?
So as I said, the budgets are limited. And if you look at the demands that are raised by the services, each service, the demands are significantly more than what the government actually allots to them.
Yeah.
And therefore, you need to sort of prioritize as to looking at the modernization of the three services. That, these are essential requirements for, say, a specific service. And therefore, that service needs to be prioritized over the others because of an essential requirement. Otherwise, as I said, every service was, sort of looking at its own requirements and its own structures. The other thing that was happening, Surya, was, see, there are some areas of modern war fighting that straddle the three services. For example, cyber. For example, information warfare, electronic warfare. Now, when each service is sort of, prioritizing its own requirements, some of these areas, sort of get left out. And therefore, with the CDS directly in control of, say, the space agency, the cyber agency, he can also give a push to these areas, which often, this is my practical experience, often get ignored at the cost of traditional platforms and traditional requirements of the three services. Which is why, Surya, we've seen, for example, in cyber, India has been a very, very late starter.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to understand how do the service chiefs and the CDS sit together along with their staffs? Do they, put various their respective issues on the table? How does it work? Is it very collegiate? How does it work?
Yeah, so it is a collegiate process. So what happens is that each service makes its long-term integrated capability development plan, and then each service cell will send it to headquarter IDS, and there they will collate it. And then, as you said, there is a discussion on looking at a defense capability development plan as to what is required. For example, this discussion and debate on aircraft carriers is required or not required. So the Navy feels it is required. We know from some of the statements made by General Rawat, on whether the cost is something that we can afford. So these are the kind of discussions that take place between the services and the office of the IDS and the CDS, and that helps firm up what our long-term sort of requirements are.
So we've had there have been some issues that have come out in the public domain about the Air Force having concerns about their priorities being given perhaps lesser status. How do these differences work out? Does the CDS say this is how it's going to be? How does it work?
No, I think, see, we know that the CDS, at least as of now, does not have operational responsibility. So that is something that the three services have, and so therefore, it has to be a more sort of collegiate process. You can't just turn around and say, I've said this, and therefore this is how it will happen, because ultimately the operational responsibility, as of now, still rests with the three service chiefs.
Yeah.
So I think it's more a sort of a discussion and a debate process. I know there are some issues that have come out in public domain, some statements that were made. My own feeling is, these are issues that need to be resolved quietly in discussions within the service headquarters. It would be better if these are not aired in the public.
Mm-hmm. But does the CDS have the power to overrule others?
I would think so. At least, you see, if you look at the responsibilities that he has been given, he's got a very specific charter of duties to bring in integration, to bring in jointness, to bring in efficiencies in how the budget is to be managed, to bring in integration in training, logistics, operational issues. So I think these are areas where, if there is a discussion and debate, he certainly has the authority to overrule the other chiefs. And ultimately, these important decisions will go to the political leadership. The sanction will have to come, say, from the defense minister. And so where there are, if at all there are, irreconcilable differences, I think it's the political leadership that needs to step in and, take the final call.
Mhm. So on this issue of theaterization, you briefly referred to it. Is it happening? I mean, just could you give us an update first as to what the progress has been so far?
So we know that there is a broad sort of idea that has been put in place that we'll have one maritime command and we'll have an air defense command responsible for defending the airspace of India. There will be one command which looks after the Western theater, the Pakistan front, and one command looking after the Chinese theater. There is also talk that at least for now, Northern Command, because of its responsibilities in counterinsurgency, looking after two borders, that Northern Command will be left as it is. So that broad structure we know, is something that has been proposed. As you said, there are some reservations that have come up as to whether these are the sort of right structures for the future integrated sort of theater commands. This matter has been referred to, I think, a committee of the vice chiefs, and they are going to look at it, debate it. As I said, I think everyone understands that greater jointness and integration is required. Yeah. Now, what form the structures take place is different. We should not abandon the idea of jointness integration just because there are some reservations. We can debate and discuss exactly the organizational structures and how they will take place. But in this debate and discussion, as I said, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that integration and jointness in war fighting is absolutely essential, and it will only enhance our operational capability if we go in for these. And that is what I think General Rawat was very, very strongly pushing for.
General Rawat held many hats, wore many hats. He was Secretary DMA. He was, I think, also military advisor to the command authority, to the nuclear authority. Is that okay? Is it okay in terms of efficiency? What's your sense?
So yes, as I said earlier, also he had a lot on his plate. He had to set up the DMA, his own office. You're right; he's a part of the Nuclear Command Authority, which, in any case, the chairman of Chiefs of Staff Committee was advisor or part of the Nuclear Command Authority. I think, and this is again my personal view, if we have a VCDS, who becomes the Secretary DMA. It could then help the CDS concentrate and look at the larger macro issues without getting into small bureaucratic matters that the DMA has to deal with. So maybe a VCDS as we go forward is probably the answer to taking on the role of Secretary DMA. Obviously, important files will still go to the CDS for approval. But at least he's insulated from some of the day-to-day work, and so therefore, as I said, can concentrate on the macro issues, the big picture.
Mm-hmm. So, what ideally would you say the CDS should just be looking at, without getting into smaller issues? What are the big macro issues he should be looking at?
So, two things. I think how the military structure should look like in the future. Which is, this whole issue of integration, bringing in jointness. There are a lot of areas. Let's take one, for example, training. Training on similar helicopters is being carried out. Say the ALH is being carried out separately by the Air Force, separately by the Army. The air defense training, for example, on similar missiles like the Akash missiles, is being separately carried out by the Air Force, separately by the Army. So there are areas in training, logistics, where we can bring in, much greater efficiencies. Capability development is an important area that we need to discuss. So what is the kind? The point is, I don't think we are ever going to be able to match the Chinese in the size of our defense budget.
Absolutely, yeah.
And therefore, we need to be very, very clear about what is the kind of capability that we need to develop and what should that shape be. I mean, do we need a stronger Navy, for example? I mean, that's a larger question. And today, I think they're between 15-18% of the budget. So does that budget need to be increased? If that needs to be increased, where will, for example, the cut take place? What will we do with our future technologies that are to be adopted? How is that going to come? Again, I'm afraid we have been slow in our technology adoption. You rarely hear about artificial intelligence and robotics and autonomous systems. We're only talking tank ships and aircraft.
Yeah.
So these are, I think, the broad areas. Future military structures and future capabilities is, to me, that's the priority area for the CDS.
So ideally, the next CDS should have this ambit also. There needs to be a change in the way things are being done now. Perhaps some trimming is required and some more future, projected what platforms you need.
Absolutely, Surya. So the CDS, as I said, should be actually focusing on one major part should be future capability development. And when we are saying future capability development, it isn't about how many ships and how many aircraft and how many squadrons. I think it's also about what exactly are the type of capabilities we require. Are we just going to go with conventional platforms? Is that going to be good enough against what we are now saying a two-front threat? Or do we need to look at some other type of capabilities to be able to at least impose some kind of deterrence on China?
So
let me give you one example. So let me just give you, for example, conventional missiles. I mean, look at the capability that China has in terms of conventional ballistic missiles, and we really have no means to counter it. We have been very slow, with the exception of the BrahMos, cruise missile. We have been slow to adopt. We don't have any conventional missiles in our armory. So how are you going to counter that kind of threat when China is building sort of hypersonic missiles? So when I'm saying when you look at future capabilities, is something that you need to look at. And General Rawat did actually briefly mention when he said we are looking at a rocket force. So So how will that come? What will be its shape and size? How will it be manned? All these are areas I think that we need to be looking at.
But isn't there already a missile regiment or something? I mean,
no. So as I said, conventional we have as of now only the BrahMos cruise missile. Otherwise, the missile regiments are with the Strategic Forces Command. So that's actually meant for those are primarily nuclear assets.
So last question, sir. I mean, looking at General Rawat's legacy and what requires to be done, I mean, his departure in that sense has increased the pressure on whoever comes into the job, to not only finish what he has done, but to take it forward, many steps forward, in fact. And for what you're telling me, the challenges are huge. So what is it that we're looking at now? His successor will have to do.
So actually, as I said, General Rawat has initiated the process, and I think achieved fair amount in the less than 2 years that he was the Chief of Defense Staff. So he's left pretty big shoes to fill, Surya, if I may say that. And therefore, his successor will have to ensure that he sort of hits the ground running, make sure that the momentum that was built up, by General Rawat in various initiatives, that momentum is not slowed down, because if that happens and we put things back by a few years, frankly, it's not good for our own military capability development, particularly looking at China. And I fear we are going to have a more contested border with China in the future. So therefore, the new CDS has a lot of work to do, and I think also take the three services, chiefs along with him through some quiet discussion.
Yeah.
In that sense, General Rawat was somewhat very sort of open in his remarks and statements.
Yeah. Yeah. On that note, General Hooda, thank you so much for your views and your insight. Looking forward to seeing who the next person will be, and hopefully it hits the ground running. Thank you very much, General Hooda. Pleasure having you.
Thank you, Surya. My pleasure to be with you, and a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, sir. And for those of you who are following us, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on our website, on Instagram. Keep coming to us with your questions, comments, and observations. Glad to have you. Thank you, and goodbye.